good evening. Welcome to our Spies and Spymasters happy hour, brought to you by the International Spy Museum. Tonight, we're going to be exploring animal spies. Have a really incredible speaker. Hannah Saloio will be joining us in a moment. She's the adult education experience developer at the International Spy Museum. She worked with us on the new museum, working on films and interactives. And this lady tells a mean story. She's also quite an animal fan. So I think she's the perfect person to wow you with some really exciting animal tales. You see what I did there?
I like it.
Hilarious. But before we get to hear from Hannah, we're going to visit Reese at Stoney's on P Street, and she is mixing up a salty dog to get us in the mood. Hey, Reese.
Hey,
Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Reese.
How you guys doing today? So like she said, we're going to be making a salty dog. So I have already salted my rim, but you would just take a Collins glass and pre-salt your rim, put some ice cubes in it, and then put it to the side. I have also put an ice inside of my shaker. And my choice of vodka is Deep Eddy's vodka. You can also choose gin with this cocktail, but I'm going to choose vodka. We are going to use 1.5 ounces. And you could use 1 ounce of grapefruit juice. And it's honestly as simple as that. We're going to take it. And we're going to pour it.
Oh my gosh. I want. Look at that. Oh.
Cheers, guys.
Oh, cheers. Woo. And Stoney's is open, and open
for carry out 202-234-1818 is our number. We are open daily from 12 to 8.
So if you're tired of cooking, and I'm sure tired of cooking, you can call Stoney's. Thank you so much for being here, Reese. And Hannah, before I turn this totally over to you, I know you're drinking something really cool. Do you want to show everybody?
I am. I found this, actually, Amanda, you've got me onto this, and then I found it at my store about a month, whenever I left last month ago, I'm sure. And it's called Spy Pig. How cute is this? So I'm going to be drinking bubbly Spy Pig over this lecture. It is produced in France sparkling.
And that was a gift from Dina Adams, our collections guru. So thank you, Dina. I am going away now and turning it over to the fabulous Hannah Saloio.
Thanks, Amanda. Awesome. I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Animal Spies. A couple things. Thank you for everyone who sent me photos of their animals. I threw some of them on the screen for you to see. I know a couple of those are maybe New Mexican animals, and we'll get there in a little bit. And we got a spy animal in the corner there. First things first, I want to preface this by saying a lot of these animals I'm going to speak about today do end up dead. Unfortunately, these animals died in the line of duty or were used in various ways that aren't always necessarily appropriate or nice, but I just want to put that out there. I'm also hoping today, as we go through this, that maybe I'll throw in a couple small pop culture references. I love how animals and spying has influenced pop culture. Amanda is the guru of this, actually. So hopefully you'll see some connections to things you know about. But like Amanda said earlier, I was brought on to the museum as one of the coordinators to get us open about 2 years ago. And at that time, I was managing the films and interactive, and another young woman was managing the design and the final exhibits. Like, her job was crazy. And one day in our office, this photo came across her desk. And I vividly remember her turning around, looking at me and being like, Hannah, what is this? And we were just like amazed, like, this has got to be Photoshopped. There is no way this is real. We printed it out. It was on our door of our office until we opened. Why is this dolphin wearing something? Are dolphins spying? I don't know. So it got us digging into what this means. And we actually talk about this in the museum. This dolphin here is actually part of the US Navy. Her name is Canine, and she is part of the Navy reconnaissance team who does countermeasure mine operations. And what is on her fin is actually it's called a pinger device. It's actually the phrase I found. It is so her handler, while she is going down tracking for mines can keep track of her in the ocean. But that's not the only way dolphins have been brought up in intelligence. In 2015, Hamas, the Palestinian organization, captured what they said was an Israeli spy dolphin. One report said it was captured with a camera on its head. I have not found a photo of this, however. One report I found also said it had killer arrows on its head. And this gets you digging into the conspiracy theories about animal spies. So we're just going to address this at the beginning, that if you Google, there is an entire Wikipedia page about conspiracy Israeli animals. Some of them have photos, some of them do not. This is a photo. Let's see if I can get it to go. There we go. This is a photo of a vulture that was captured in Lebanon, also accused of spying for Israel. They actually finally went back and said that is not true, that it had tracking systems on it because it was part of a scientific experiment and came off a reserve. But you'll see reports for squirrels and eagles and wild boars. And I recently read an article about lizards in a cave in Iran. So people love to think of crazy ways animals are being used in the world. And hopefully today you're going to learn about some of the actual operations animals were used in and almost used in. But I'm going to try to keep everything themed. So let's move on. I'm going to stay in the realm of aquatic animals. When you think animal spies, one of our favorite villains, Dr. Evil, finally got his sharks with laser beams on their head. And related, not to sharks, but to dolphins, are whales. This actually happened a year ago. This was on April 26th of 2019. In Norway, this adorable beluga whale showed up. And he was capturing the attention of the fishermen because he was playful. He was wanting to play. He was following people around. He was wanting people to scratch around his blowhole. He was just this cute, adorable little beluga whale. And when they looked closer, they realized he had this strap around him. Now, on the strap, it is said that it was written, "Equipment of St. Petersburg." Important fact, it was also written in English. Now, both the US and Russia have admitted to using aquatic animals in various ways. There is a rumor that beluga whales have been used in Russian espionage or in military training programs. But they also noticed that this whale was very good at things like fetching. Someone dropped a GoPro and there's a video of it actually going down, picking up the GoPro and bringing it back up to the person. It knows how to fetch, all these wonderful things. But Russia has said that this is not their beluga whale. One tiny little conspiracy theory I've seen on the internet is people believe that possibly this beluga whale escaped from St. Petersburg, Florida. And it went all the way over to Norway. I looked this up this morning. That is over 4,700 miles of flying for a beluga whale. I don't know if that's possible, but this beluga whale has kind of become this cute little symbol of this Norway town in Hammerfest. So when they decided to name him, this is actually, see, it's coming up. Here we go. This is the sign that you will see in this harbor. And his name is the combination of whale in Norwegian and Vladimir Putin. So maybe he's a Russian spy whale, maybe he's not, who knows? But they are trying to have him relocated. I know there's a documentary that's supposed to come out about him shortly, hopefully in the next couple of years. So. And speaking of Arctic, let's move on to some land mammals, polar bears. And this one actually takes place in my backyard, Washington, D.C., in the 60s. This article actually was just written about in the Washington Post in February of this year of 2020. So I haven't had time to dig deep, but it's just such a cute story that I had to share it. So in 1962, in the middle of the Cold War, three people from DC got together. An attorney named Ralph Becker, who is kind of runs in the Republican circles and is a member of the Explorer Club. A man named Sweeney, who is part of the council to kind of out communism from America. And a third man, a Norwegian/American explorer, whose last name is Rohn. Now, in this article, they were able to interview Rohn's daughter, who is still alive. Her name is Karen. And she talked about the three of them got together and their families all traveled to Norway, sticking with Norway here for a second, and under the guise of collecting polar bear cubs for the zoos, two different zoos in America, both the US Zoo and the the DC Zoo and the Detroit Zoo. And then she says, while they were there, they visited a mining town. And it came out that this mining town in Norway was actually being mined by the Russians. And this whole trip was actually a guise. She believes, this has not been fully confirmed, but one of her family friends was Richard Helms, eventual director of the CIA. And she does know her dad wrote a note to him at one point that this Russian town, they had actually sent these people there to see what intelligence was happening in this town, because it was in the perfect place to put up surveillance, radar, we don't know. The polar bears, however, they brought 4 cubs back. 3 of their names are Cookie, Harriet, and Donny Boy. Cookie, I know, went to the Detroit Zoo. Harriet and Donny Boy, I believe, both stayed in Washington, D.C. However, our zoo does not have polar bears anymore. The closest you're going to find them now is going to be in Maryland. So let's stay on the CIA route and let's move on to, I know that this is a favorite of the Spy Museum, a plan called Acoustic Kitty. So this is Cold War as well. We are in Washington, D.C. And I think when a lot of people think spying, they think the little bugs. You put a bug in someone's office and you hear the conversation you want to be listening to. It is not that simple. If you put a bug in a park bench, you are going to hear barking dogs. You are going to hear every conversation. You are going to hear all kinds of things that you don't want to hear. What our ears are really good are, because of all the internal mechanisms in our ear, they are able to distinguish certain sounds, and that's kind of what we wanted. So the CIA, the Technical Service Division, went to recreate that. Like, can we make an artificial ear, basically? And one guy finally goes, well, why would we do that? There are plenty of creatures with these hearing abilities. Why don't we just use something that exists in nature? So they turned to animals. So if we were to put a listening device in an animal, what would be the best one? Rats and birds get scurried away. If you see a dog on the streets of Washington, D.C., it is most people who will stop and try to find the dog's owner or call, humane societies. Cats, however, somehow have this reputation. If you see a stray alley cat, you kind of let it go if it's not bugging you, maybe shoo away, but it can sit there and not bug you. So they were like, let's go with cats. Now, there is a couple different versions to this story. I'm going to kind of combo the two. We can talk about the differences later if you have questions. But this was automatically put in the high risk category. The idea of turning a cat into a listening device, Acoustic Kitty. So the first thing that is agreed on is that they did take a cat. This is before the first heart transplant. So electronics and body parts just don't go well together yet. We are hot, sweaty, animals are the same. It's just kind of gross in there, and putting batteries and electronics in there just doesn't make sense. However, they figure this out. They get a veterinarian, and under surgery, they put a microphone in the cat's ear. They put a transmitter, I've seen one here and then one in the back of its neck. And then one story says they ran the transmitter antenna down its back, the antenna down its back, and the other one says it went up its tail. I don't know which one is worse. Cat recovers from surgery, and lo and behold, it's working. They're thrilled about this, they're excited. And this is where the stories kind of follow two different paths here. One path said, they then very quickly realized you can't train a cat. So they scrapped the project right there. The other story says they actually took it into the field to test. So they went somewhere in Washington, D.C. likely, pulled up in their white CIA van, undid the door, let the cat go, and to everyone's amusement, the cat wanders off. Because the idea is that these cats will probably go, in around, maybe the Russian embassy, places like this. Cat scurries off, and it is immediately hit by a taxi. So Acoustic Kitty unfortunately passes away, but you can't leave Acoustic Kitty there. They had to scrape him up off the highway or the residential area. I don't know where it was at, because you can't leave a cat full of electronics in the street. So let's stay on the CIA route and let's go with some money cat stuff. So the CIA, one of our coworkers was nice enough to send me these images and tell me about this. I didn't know anything about this until recently. These are called dog do. That is their CIA code word is dog do, but they are not made out of dog do. They are made out of tiger dung. And they are made out of tiger gun, and that is an image of if you were to cut in half, this is what you'd see. These were beacons, and these beacons would come out, and there'd be signals overhead, and It was ways during the Vietnam War they could pass signals. Why use tigers? Because there's tigers in Vietnam in the jungles, not really stray dogs running around. And it was, I think, firmer as well. So that is why we use tiger dung. But let's throw it way back. I like going back in time now to World War I. So I think a lot of people, when they think spy animals, the first thing that pops into their heads is pigeons. There's a lot of pop culture references to pigeons and spying and carrier pigeons. The pigeon on the left-hand side with the little camera attached to it, that is an image, and actually a bird in our looking, listening, sensing gallery in the museum. That little camera was invented by a man named Julius, I'm gonna mess up his name, Nirnbonner, who he actually would use pigeons to carry prescriptions for him. And he invented the little camera it's wearing, that is him in the center, and it would time, so as the bird flapped, the camera would keep clicking away. So the photo at the bottom is actually a photo from 1915. If you can see at the edges, you can see the feathers of the bird. And that is taken in the Kronenberg, what is now the Kronenberg Palace Hotel in Frankfurt, Germany. And then on the far right of your screen, our one-legged friend, that is a bird named Cher-ami. Cher-ami was actually a British bird given to the US Army Signal Corps when they were in France. And in 1918, she was one of the birds in a battle where 194 Americans were still alive. However, these other Americans were shooting at them because the Germans were surrounding them. They were in the center, and other Americans were pelting our own men with bombs and stuff. So the man there to stop it had 3 carrier pigeons with him. He took one, wrote a note being like, stop firing on your men, make it stop, sends it off, that bird is shot down. A second bird is shot down, and then he grabs his last bird, which is Cher-ami. He puts a note on her left leg in a little silver canister, and it says, we are along the road parallel to 276.4. Our own artillery is dropping a barrage directly on us. For heaven's sakes, stop it. When Cher-ami is released, she is shot down, but survives. She is able to get back up into the air, flies away, flies 25 miles in 25 minutes, and she becomes the hero of the 77th Infantry Division. And actually recently in 2019, she was awarded one of the first 8 animals awarded the Animals in War and Peace Medal of Bravery. She was one of 2 pigeons, she was from World War I and another one from World War II named G.I. Joe, the pigeon, who was also a message carrier pigeon. If you want to see her, she actually still exists today. She is stuffed and taxidermied, and you can see her once they reopen at the American History Museum here in Washington, D.C. But like I said, there are tons of pop culture movies about pigeons. So if you're looking for an animal-themed spy night after this, I highly recommend these 2 films. The one on the left is Spies in Disguise. That is a new movie that just came out with Will Smith. He's a suave spa and then accidentally gets turned into a pigeon. And the other one is a Disney production of Valiant. So sticking on, let's go a little forward. We are now in World War II. My favorite animal stories come from World War II, and I think it's because they are just so ridiculous, they should not exist. This one is a little less about how animals were used, but how they semi-prevented something from happening. So the OSS, which is the Office of Strategic Services, which is the predecessor of the modern CIA, was trying to think of a way to kill high-ranking Japanese officers. And one thing they came up with was in Japanese-occupied China, is they realized these men were visiting Chinese call girls. So they first figured out, well, how can we get these call girls to deliver poison or something toxin? They figured that out first. Use your imagination. And then they decide to give them the toxin botulism. So botulism is a very strong toxin, and they give it to their contacts in Asia. It is smuggled in, but then no Japanese officers are dying. And they're like, okay, what happened? So the OSS calls up the Asian branch and goes, hi, what's happening? Did our toxin not work? And they're like, no, we really wanted to check and make sure that this was as potent as you said. So we tested it on some of our animals and nothing happened. We're like, well, what did you test it on? Donkeys. So they had donkeys, they tested them, they gave them this poison, and not a single donkey died. They really could tell that they were poisoned. Turns out though, botulism will kill anything. It's extremely toxic. It kills all living beings except for donkeys. Donkeys are pretty much the one thing immune to this toxin. So the plan never was put in, all because of a donkey's immunity. The next one is foxes. My little brother's favorite animal is foxes, so I know he loves this story. And this is an operation called Operation Fantasia. So Operation Fantasia really is part of what is called morale operations. So in World War II, there were various morale operations, including, in Germany and Italy, there was an operation called Operation Sauerkraut, where the idea is to kind of pull on people's psyche. Like, you want to break them down as humans, not so much, not the bombs and the guns, but like, how can you mess up with their mind? And Operation Sauerkraut, did something called League of Lonely Women, where they would send flyers to German soldiers saying, hey, if you see one of these women wearing a heart badge, please spend the night with her. It's your wives, your daughters, we're all taking this charge to keep you guys warm at night. And so it would play with these men's minds thinking, oh my gosh, my wife and my girlfriend are now with other men. So these are what morale operations were. And this one was it was for Japan. And it goes back, it was by a man named Edgar Salinger, and it plays off the religion of Shintoism. So Shintoism, it was founded in Japan. It is actually a very beautiful religion. And part of it is, if you've ever been to Japan, you will see something called, I'm going to mess this up, kitsune. So kitsune are little foxes. There are good little foxes. They bring good tidings. They are good. They are happy little things. Or there's bad kitsune. So these are like little soul-sucking dementors who, suck your soul, and they are bad luck. So the idea was to play off the Japanese mindset that if you see these bad kitsune around, something is wrong. You are doing something wrong. Something is just off in the world. So they decided to get a bunch of fox balloons. They glow in the dark, and they were going to blow up all these fox balloons, release them all over Japan, and have agents running around making howling noises, being like, they're after us, they're after us. But after thinking about it, they're like, well, why use balloons when we could use the real thing? So they gather up a bunch of foxes, invent I don't think it ever gets there, like waterproof paint that is a glow in the dark for foxes. And they approach General MacArthur, and they're like, hey, we would like to paint foxes glow in the dark, release them in Japan. We'll send agents around. We'll make them smell like foxes. They'll look like they're possessed, and people will go crazy. Like, will help us win the war. He wants to see it work though. So they do a test trial at the Chesapeake Bay. They release some little foxes. The water takes away all their paint, and the water that doesn't, when the water doesn't get them, they lick off the paint, right? They lick all the time. So they're like, all right, let's try this again. They do a second test, but they want to see how the public react to glow in the dark foxes. So they take 30 foxes, they paint them with their glow in the dark paint, and they set them loose in Central Park. So they set them loose. People are horrified. This is working. Like, this test worked. People are like, what is going on? Why are there glow in the dark foxes running around Central Park? It is reported in various newspapers. And my favorite quote is, horrified citizens shocked by the sudden sight of leaping ghost-like animals. So it worked. But this never happened in Japan. This is all starting to take place right around when we dropped the bomb. So it never really goes into action. Would have worked? I don't think so, but who knows? And then I'm going to share one last one because I have a guest today that I'm going to bring on for you. Is a operation that has its roots in probably the best state in our nation, my home state, New Mexico. And it starts here. Let's see, I think it's coming up now. Carlsbad Caverns. So if you ever get a chance to go to New Mexico, it makes for a great spy road trip. You can hit Carlsbad, you can hit White Sands, you can go to the Atomic Museum. Like, there is all kinds of spy everywhere in New Mexico. And this starts here. So there was a man named Dr. Lytle Adams, who was a dentist and on the side inventor. So Dr. Adams is in Carlsbad during Pearl Harbor. He hears about Pearl Harbor while he's visiting Carlsbad. Now, Carlsbad Caverns, which you see on the screen here, is famous because it is a cave system. Now, if you get a chance to go, it is incredible. You go down into the cave, you like walk down, we get to the bottom, there's actually like a food court built in there now. It is insane, it is beautiful. But what it's famous for is it holds the world's largest population of bats. So in the evening, if you're there during bat season, which falls between roughly like May to October, go to the end though, because then there's more bats because the baby bats are born. And in the evening, you can come and like those people are doing, and you watch the bats come out of the cave at night. So they fly around at night. And if you go super early in the morning, like 4 a.m., you can watch the bats go back into the cave. Now, it's hard to find photos of this, however, because they don't allow any photography unless you apply for a license, because bats are very sensitive to light. But Dr. Lyle Adams is there. He sees it. And like I said, he is an amateur inventor. One of his inventions is something called ship to ship, ship to shore, and shore to ship air mail transfer system and apparatus. It was something that would take about 2 hours off the transit time of mail in the day. Nothing too crazy, but he did get a patent for it. He did get to test it for one important person, Eleanor Roosevelt, who he became friends with and even took her in his flight because he was his plane, excuse me, because he was a pilot as well. So as he leaves his spring break, he is driving back to Pennsylvania and he's thinking about his trip in New Mexico and goes, you know what? The US has a lot of bats, and Japan, a lot of their cities are made out of paper and wood at this point. You know, and bats really like to fly into weird, dark, creepy places, right? You see bats in TV shows and they're always in the back of an attic. What if we took bats, put an incinerator device on them, you get bat bombs, and we'll drop them all over Japan and we'll incinerate Japan. So he writes up his ideas in a letter, he mails it off, and it ends up on FDR's desk because he knows Eleanor. So he's got that woman behind the scenes who's gonna get it done. So she gives the letter to FDR, goes, I want you to take this seriously. FDR hands it over to Bill Donovan, who will eventually be head of CIA, and goes, look into this. Meanwhile, Dr. Adams has gone to Harvard. He's working with people to figure out like, what bats do we use? How much weight can they carry? What does this look like? So I have found one image of a bat. There it comes up. Come on. There we go. This is a bat with one of the incinerator devices on it. It basically turns it into a little bat bomb. But then they have the problem of how do you get the bats from New Mexico, which is where they ended up getting them from, to the first testing site, which is going to be in California. What you have to do is you have to put the bats into hibernation. So when bats get cold, they hibernate. So they create little bat stacks and put these little bats with their little devices in the cold. And the idea is once you drop them from the plane, the warm air will warm them up enough to wake them up. They fly away and poof, you have the bat bomb working. So the first test in California, they drop them from, I think it's a B-25 bomber, and they drop it down. It's not enough time for the bats to wake up. So they just hit the ground, adios bat. So they move the second test over. Oh, and here, just so you guys see, this is the, where'd it go? There you go. This is the device that those bat stacks were in. So this is what get released, that opens. The next test, they take back to New Mexico. They take it to Carlsbad on the Army base there, and they create a Japanese test village because they want to show how effective these bat bombs are going to be. They still put the bats in hibernation for this test. However, New Mexico can get very hot, and it is a warm day. The bats wake up early, they wake up, and some of them immediately fly to the Japanese town. It is burnt to the ground, great success. Well, the other part of the bats fly to the Army base, and the Army base is caught on fire, and the head of the Army base, the commander, didn't even know about this. He was on a need-to-know basis. There was a couple bomb projects happening in New Mexico, so people were on very different terms. The Army cancels this. The Navy eventually picks it up, and it's given the name Project X-Ray, but it actually doesn't advance very far. It was going to take too much time for them to work out the details, figure out the bats, do all kinds of stuff before it was going to ever be in the field. So those are my very quick rundown. I know everyone's drinking here of my favorite animal stories. But a lot of where I learned these from actually is from, and these are just some of our spy animals. These are my colleagues and people who thank you who emailed me your dogs and cats and fishes. is one of my colleagues who I think is jumping on now. Vince, are you there? Hey, Vince. Vince wrote this book called Nuking the Moon, and actually it came out like right when I started working at the museum, and the first time I ever heard you speak was telling the bat bomb story, which, being a girl from New Mexico, I automatically gravitated to. So I read this book, but the first part of your book, there's like, it's broken down into various segments of things that didn't happen, basically. But the first part is animals. Why did you make the first part of your book animals?
I mean, I'd love to have some, really interesting answer to that about, kind of how things were very logically laid out. But the truth is, I wanted to tell the Acoustic Kitty story first. And I wanted to lead off the book with the story that we love to tell at the Spy Museum. It's one of the ones that you can tell to any audience. It really doesn't matter how old the audience is, right? Kids think it's hilarious. Adults think it's hilarious. And so by leading off the Acoustic Kitty, animals kind of had to follow. And so there's no special reason for the order other than it has to begin with Acoustic Kitty.
I mean, you have a cat, so like this makes a lot of sense, who I'm sure will walk the screen at some point.
Yeah, no, the last couple of times we've done webinars, Elwood, the cat, has made an appearance. So he's officially part of the exhibitions and programs team now at the Spy Museum.
And so reading this, like, I know not all the stories, I think 3 or 4 of them I told her from your book, but there are other ones. Are there any others you left on the cutting room floor that just didn't make it? They were too sad, they were too classified?
Really, yeah, I mean, a lot of the ones that didn't make the book are ones that we just couldn't prove. I tried to make sure that everything I put inside here, I had at least some evidence to back it up. The one that is my favorite, that's actually in the book that you didn't talk about, is where the British decided to warm up their nuclear landmines by using live chickens, and that is absolutely true. The Blue Peacock program, it is absolutely bonkers. I mean, it is bat whatever crazy. The idea of bat bomb crazy. Instead of using fiberglass or some kind of insulation, let's use live chickens. And for some reason, that seemed like a good idea. And so in many cases, there were stories that were just too crazy to be verified in any way that I felt as a historian comfortable enough to put them inside this book.
And the last one, I told you this yesterday, so I hope you thought about this, is if you could name any operation involving animals, what would its name be? Because these have wonderful names: Project Fantasia, Project X-Ray, Acoustic Kitty. And what animal would you use? You don't have to tell us what you'd be doing, but what it would be with.
I think it'd have to be Operation Atomic Ferret. I think that would be exactly the right operation. I already know what operation it would be, but I can't tell you, or I'd have to kill you.
Oh, that makes sense. So thank you, but I know we've had questions coming in. So Amanda, what do you have for us?
Oh, we've got some very interesting questions. One is, someone wants to know why did they use dung? Why did they make those beacons out of dung?
I actually don't know that. I know part of it is you're not going to pick it up.
That's the key, right? The idea is what's less likely to be picked up if some kind of a patrol is there. They're going to, oh no, let's not touch that. That's if you see some kind of stick or you see some kind of rock, you're more likely to grab that and ruin the operation. But no one's touching poo, and that's just something that made it even more secure as a potential spy device.
Oh, here's a good, got some really questions are flying in now. People want to know, to what extent have animal rights activism movement, to what extent has that impacted this sort of these sort of projects?
Well, you're sure as hell going to keep them secret. I mean, I think that's one of the most important things. Most of these programs, the animals don't make out very well. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bats were killed in Project X-Ray. Even though theoretically only one cat was killed, maybe. And in Acoustic Kitty, it still was cut open and operated on, and they messed with its brain and all these other things. So, this is not, PETA probably would not agree to allow any of these operations to happen. Well, that's the good thing about classification, is that most likely PETA is not going to have anybody cleared TSSCI to find out what's going on. So you're in a decent position there. I think that what's interesting is what you led off with, Hannah, is some of these modern applications of animals.
Yeah.
And there are actually animal rights considerations when it comes to the way we use things like dolphins and sea otters and other things in our ports. Mainly, you're looking at the handlers themselves being incredibly well trained in how to make sure they're humanely treating these animals. It's really interesting. You think they would be like, well, whatever, they're going hunting for mines, but they do actually take it very seriously, because they, in many ways, like working dogs and military working dogs, they're considered part of the team. You know, when a military working dog dies, they get a military funeral. The same idea behind the dolphins and the sea otters. They're treated as part of the unit.
Other people this is a great question, because in addition to poop, there have been other animal related items that have been used for concealment or for disguising something. Hannah, I wondered if you were going to have a photograph of some of that.
I'm trying to figure out which one you're talking about. I'm going through my head of like my Rolodex of all of our spy images.
Rats.
Oh, the rats. Yeah, the rats. So white rats, which were used as dead drops. You would stuff things in the rat, leave it in the field. But the trick was, so the other animals didn't eat it, is you would sprinkle hot sauce on it, because a dog also doesn't like hot sauce. So if a wild dog or a stray cat goes to pick up the rat, it would drop it because it was hot. I know there were a lot of white rats used in that, or it was rats dyed white. I remember, it's some weird thing there.
There are a lot of great stories about intelligence agencies having to come up with ways to keep animals away. Everything from Julia Child coming up with the shark repellent formula recipe as part of the OSS in World War II, to if you come to the Spy Museum, there's a rock that we have on display in our Massent section, which was used in Afghanistan to collect information. The DIA had to come up with a very interesting way to keep goats from eating their rocks while they were out. And so they had some poor schmuck inside a DIA who was a chemist who thought he'd be making really cool stuff for American intelligence. They're like, we need you to get a goat repellent going to make sure our secret rocks don't get eaten. And that's similar to what's going on here with the rats.
Untasty morsels,
Yes.
right? So one of our colleagues doesn't love us because they Rachel Cannon asked a really tough question. The difference between homing and carrier pigeons and surveillance pigeons, do y'all happen to know, are they the same type of pigeon? Are they different?
I know they're different.
They're slightly different. I mean, the idea is that most birds, actually, if you train them well enough, will learn where they're from, will learn their home, you know, whatever cage they're in. They know where their food is coming from. They know where their handlers are. So in many respects, you can put them just about anywhere relatively near where their home is, and they'll find their way back to it. The difference between a kind of relatively straightforward carrier pigeon and the ones that you put cameras on is the ones that had cameras affixed to them were much larger and stronger, because the cameras weighed a whole lot more than just a simple message. And what's interesting about all of these is that these are not the kind of pigeons that we have lying around today. The pigeons that, you know, are pooping on the Nathan Hale statue at CIA, which is so appropriate, are not the same pigeons that were used in World War I. Those were almost hunted to extinction during the war, because they were exactly what spy aircraft are today, or satellites are today, or messengers. You wanted to make sure that that message didn't get through, or that picture wasn't taken. So they were fair game. Hundreds of thousands of pigeons were killed during World War I because of essentially counterintelligence measures to make sure that the message didn't get through or the picture wasn't taken.
Hannah, someone wants to know the names of those darling polar bears. Maybe they need to name some polar bears at home.
They do. So I actually, hang on. Their names were Cookie, Donnie Boy, and I'm blanking on the last one. I have it written down somewhere. I know Karen, the woman who was interviewed in the article, was upset that they never named one Karen after her, because all the rest are named for the rest of the kids. I know Donnie Boy is the son who was left behind because he couldn't go, he was too young. Harriet, that's the other one.
That's it. Good.
Yes, and we don't have polar bears anymore at our zoo.
And some people want to know, well, I'll save that one for later. There's definitely some questions about drones and things disguised as insects or, devices. And we do have that cool video that just went up on our the Spy Museum website and on our YouTube channel at the Insectothopter, which looks like a dragonfly. There are other examples that we have on display or know about.
Well, the Insectothopter is the real kind of the beginning of all of this. This is when all the intelligence agencies are trying to find ways to miniaturize unmanned vehicles. And it fails miserably. I mean, that's one of the things that we have on display at the Spy Museum that just didn't work. The CIA version didn't work. They couldn't come up with a way to stabilize it in flight. The one we have on display is actually a KGB copy of the CIA one that also didn't work. But because microprocessors weren't small enough to control fly-by-wire operations as they would be today, and so you've seen some movies probably where there's been little beetles or there's been little flies that operate as drones. That is true. Miniaturizations allowed us to do a whole lot of things that we couldn't do before. And that's where we're going to kind of get into a position where you're going to get to even think of microscopic things or have the opportunity to be used, to where it's not, you don't need to hide it as a bug because it's literally invisible to the naked eye because of the miniaturization. Really what's holding all of this back is battery technology, and that's something that we talk about for a lot of different things. Listening devices, wireless, anything, is the ability to make batteries small enough with a high capacity to keep something powered for a long time. Once you figure this out, so Elon Musk or whoever is going to be doing the next generation of batteries, that's going to be the big move forward of espionage technology, because if you can keep something powered that's microscopic for hours at a time, then we can do a whole lot that we can't do today.
What about go ahead. I was gonna say, like, speaking of bugs though, like, we copy bugs, but we're also still using bugs in other ways. I know we haven't put it up in the museum yet, we're trying to put it up for a year now, is a video about bees being used to smell bombs. So they're actually training, like, honeybees, I think is what they're using, to stick out their tongue if they smell a bomb, which you put these little bees and you put a very, very zoomed in camera just to watch their tongue come in and out. And it's proving, what I've read, is pretty effective.
It's hard to train bees. You're gonna be like, sit, and give them a little treat, and like roll over.
They're like little tiny bee vests.
Would you rather train a bee or a cat?
Yeah, apparently Hannah's not wrong. The idea is that these bees are incredibly trainable, and you're using different scents and different pheromones. Cats, not so much.
Right. Hey, what about the catfish, the famous catfish device? Charlie the catfish. Tell us about Charlie.
Well, if you ever get the opportunity, and very few do, but if you get the opportunity to go to the CIA museum at Langley, you'll see Charlie. And this was an attempt to create a drone looking like a fish, which is much easier than one looking like a dragonfly, because you don't have to worry about aerodynamics. You don't have to worry about, something falling out of the sky. And Charlie had a mechanical flipper, and it can kind of move through the water. And it was designed to be used to get up into coastal areas and do surveillance. It's actually still classified how much it did and how much we're using that kind of technology today.
Gosh, we just got some cool questions. Someone wants to know, what was Dr. Adams' reaction to the failure of the bat bomb? Was he broken-hearted that it bombed?
Yeah.
So we don't like to use the word failure because none of these programs actually failed. They never actually happened. Adams actually was someone who, on his deathbed, and he lived several decades after this, swore that they could have won the war with the bat bombs. And even more than that, swore that less lives would have been lost on the Japanese side if we had used bat bombs versus atomic weapons. Now, it's counterfactual. You can't prove this to be true. But this is, the premise makes some sense, is that, if you burn a city gradually, if fire spreads across versus just vaporizing it in well fell swoop, you might give people a chance to escape. And, we never had the opportunity to try this out. Lytle Adams, again, went to his deathbed with this being kind of the failure to convince people that this was an option. the bigger thing he failed to convince people of, and this is one that I'm even more upset about,
I know
is
what you're going to say.
his big idea, and Hannah, you can take this from me. His big idea that would have revolutionized the world was what?
A fried chicken vending machine.
I mean, fried chicken vending machines. Like, why are they not everywhere?
I need that right now.
Right. I mean, why are they not? That
I
shows
also,
the genius of this man.
yeah, I
Wasn't
also firmly believe he was like an inventor who just kind of never like was put down. Like he came up with the next idea, then the next
Yep.
idea, then the next idea, then the next. He's like flying Eleanor Roosevelt around in his jet. Like he
well,
did
no,
pretty well.
yeah. I mean, and you can imagine, if I walked up to Melania Trump today and be like, "Hey, jump in my plane," the Secret Service probably would not think that's a good idea. But Lionel Adams, the best way I've heard him described is he's Santa Claus. He's just big, pudgy guy with a white beard that was jolly and ho ho ho, and just had all these wonderful ideas, including trying to burn Japan to the ground using bats.
Oh, here's a Hannah. People want to know where you got that Spy Pig wine.
I got the Spy Pig wine it is on 14th Street, and I'm blanking on the name. It's a place that does the 3 for $20 bottles. So it's a great place. Support local businesses. I'm just gonna throw that out there, like Stoney's, Stoney's is my local bar. So I know they're also doing alcohol to go.
Vince, someone wonders, what is the name of your book again?
Well, let's see. There's the hardcover version, which has been out since last year, but wonderfully on May the 5th, so in a couple weeks, the paperback comes out of Nuking the Moon. Now, I know we have an international audience, so if you're in Britain, you can actually pick up the English version of Nuking the Moon. There's also one in Finnish, in Italian, in Polish. So no matter where you're listening from, if you need it translated for you, you can have that work out.
The Finnish copy is really the definitive one, in my opinion.
Well, what's funny is that the Italians thought bat bombs were the best story in the entire book. And so it's not called Nuking the Moon, it's called the Bat Bombs, is the name of the Italian version of Nuking the Moon. Well,
after that commercial, yes, which was very nicely placed, I think, and yes, that wasn't a fake. Someone wants to know, and this is very Trojan horse, have any of these animals been given as gifts, to leaders? Like, here's a really darling kitten that has a bug in it.
I do know, I don't know if it was used as a spy bug, but I do know that the very first Siamese cat ever to come to America was given to a president, and I'm blanking on which president it was, but it was the first time a Siamese cat ever came to the US was a gift as a president. But I don't have any spy animals. Vince?
Well, I mean, I think that any gifts that are given to world leaders are vetted pretty extensively. I mean, you'd be hard pressed probably to find something used as kind of a spy device. Certainly, people have tried to bug dog collars and other things, but that's the first thing you'd look at. I would, at least. You'd hope that the counterintelligence guys would be better than that and make sure that it's not there. There's been a lot of conversation, talking about Trojan horses in the past of using animals to spread viruses and biological weapons. That's something that is kind of inappropriate to talk about right now. But, going back to Alexander the Great, who used to catapult plague victims and plague cows into castles that he was trying, or areas, cities that he had under siege. That's one way that animals, I mean, it's straight out of Monty Python too, right? Run away because the cows are being launched. That's not all that far-fetched. That was something that was done back in the day. But again, it's very hard, as we saw with what the CIA tried to do with Acoustic Kitty, to create the perfect spy animal. It's very difficult to do.
People are very intrigued by the bear story and want to know, have any other bear species been used in intelligence operations?
I mean, so this story only came out in February of this year, and it was in the Post. I haven't, I don't know if any of us have been able to talk to anyone or gone deep into this, because we went into shutdown mode, I think about 2 weeks after this article came out. And it wasn't that they were necessarily being used, but they were used as a cover. It was a cover of going to get these little bear cubs. They weren't used in intelligence. I don't know. I haven't seen any other bear stories across my research.
The important thing to think about for any kind of intelligence operation is access, right? The key to everything is access. The key to who you recruit and who you want as your assets, or what do they have access to? And kind of thinking about who owns bears, right? Who has them just lying around? It's not that often, right? I mean, that's one of the reasons that Acoustic Kitty made a lot of sense, is because cities around the world, cats are just kind of walking down the street. I mean, Istanbul is a great example. That's where the Acoustic Kitty idea came from. There are stray cats everywhere. And there, imagine a stray cat in a park kind of walking up and rubbing itself against your legs. Unless you're a complete monster, you don't you reach down and you scratch the kitty behind the ear, right? You don't think a horrible cat.
Unless you're allergic to a cat, Vince.
Okay, unless you're a monster or allergic to a cat.
Or now we can't touch
I'm
anybody
allergic
else.
to cats.
Right, true.
And
Yeah,
we
actually,
can't touch other people's animals now, which is killing me when I take my exercise routine, my break from shutdown.
well, it's even worse because actually somebody gave their cat coronavirus.
So
So you're actually don't touch other people's cats because
and a tiger at the Brooklyn Zoo also tested positive for.
It was Carol's fault.
Money cats.
Yes. Hi, all you kittens and cool cats.
Well, I think now that we're into Tiger King and Carol Baskin and Money Cats, I'm going to ask the very first question we received as a wrap up. Did the animals volunteer to spy, or were they coerced via blackmail or some other nefarious means?
I mean, I do think out of all these, I think the sweetest one somehow was the beluga whale, because not that he was necessarily coerced, but he clearly loves human affection. I don't know if that's because he was trained that way or whatever, but you're reading all these reports, you see people posting on YouTube or Instagram about him, like, I got to pet him, and now they're trying to keep people away from that. So I don't know if he just likes it for the treats, but I don't think anyone was coerced, Vince.
Well, I mean, obviously the cat didn't volunteer and the bats weren't volunteering. But if you look at some of the ways, again, that dolphins and otters are being used, again, the human animal rights people may have a different view of this, but they love what they're doing. Yeah, they get a lot of fish, and it's somewhat like, Flipper at, the Seaquarium. Sure, if you feed them enough fish, a dolphin will do anything. But this is an opportunity for a very smart animal to do some very intelligent operations, right? This is not kind of swim around and jump and have some tourist, kiss a tourist on a cheek. This is high level things that we're asking these animals to do. And in many cases, when you're kind of thinking about like really smart dogs and you're pushing them to do operations, they love it. They love the challenge. And there are dolphins who have amazing lives who are helping us, again, protect port cities and harbors against any kind of terrorism or things that just aren't supposed to be there, like mines or underwater bombs. Again, I can't read their minds, but this is a life that is much better than they would be if they were at a SeaWorld or somewhere like that.
Any animals that you all think are surprised haven't, animals or insects or creepy crawlies that you're surprised haven't been used?
I mean, just about all of them have been. I mean, unless it's in real life or there's some kind of animal mimetics, which is another thing that we show in the Spy Museum, where animal movement and animal traits have been used to create artificial versions of those animals, like the robotic snake that we have in the Spy Museum. These are things that every engineer in the world and certainly intelligence agencies around the world are looking to the animal kingdom as inspiration, certainly to figure out ways of movement and ways of creating new drones, but also as, how do we use what's naturally good and naturally powerful in these animals to our advantage? That's where the bee story comes from. That's where the beluga whale, or the dolphin story comes from, because these are things that humans don't do as well as animals, and we're really missing opportunities if we're not taking advantage of what's around us in the animal kingdom.
Yeah, I guess I think my answer would be thinking about the bats is we use them as bombs, but they have great echolocating device as well, and their night vision is incredible. Like I haven't seen any stories where we're trying to copy that. Sure we are, sure it's classified, sure I don't know about it. But I think that's, why use bats as bombs when they have all these other amazing attributes to you.
Well, you got to go to Gotham and
that's true.
Bruce.
City. That's true.
Well, you guys are amazing. I have to say, we got information that Spy Pig came from batch 13 on 14th Street.
I know who wrote that in.
Yes. Dina, thank you. Thank you both. Just really so much fun. Really appreciate Stoney's participating with us again and mixing up that glorious salty dog. And we're all going to run over there and have one someday when we can, but maybe order a burger in the meantime. I want to do a quick commercial for next week. At this same time, we'll be doing a happy hour about a Soviet Romeo spy, Dmitry Bistrolyotov, such a hard name to say. We have an incredible speaker on that, Shauna Oltmans, and she's going to be joined by the actor Costa Ronan, who performs as Bistrolyotov in our galleries, and he is known from The Americans and Homeland. Next Thursday at noon, Vince is going to be talking with Eric O'Neill about the Robert Hansen story, and there's just tons of other stuff. So go to our website, sign up for the programs. They're all free. You're keeping us busy and connected and happy, and we hope that we are sharing a little happiness with y'all too. Don't forget about Stoney's, and have a great night.